Hi, everybody. I'm Arden Stevens. Some of you know me, some of you don't. Nice to meet those of you that I've never met before. So I am lately working as the media coordinator and sort of jack of all trades for a gentleman named Tom Barbour, who is running for the Commonwealth Attorney here in the city of Richmond. We are running a progressive campaign to unseat a Democratic incumbent. We are hoping to turn the protests that we saw here in the city in Richmond into progress in the Commonwealth Attorney's office, which we have not seen to any satisfactory degree. We are getting ready to officially launch our campaign in February, mid-February. We have already started having some great conversations in the community. Tom hosts a Zoom town hall every day, 7 days a week, at 6 o'clock at zoom.tomrvaca.com, and I'll put information in the chat. Our website is up and running. We have a Facebook page and a Twitter account and an Instagram account, and they're not very active yet, but we'd love some follows. And anyone in the Richmond area, anyone that you know in the Richmond area that's looking for to get back into their political volunteering grind, we are, like I said, just kind of getting started right now, just officially launching in mid-February. So going to be pushing hard for that initial fundraiser and then, really getting started. We've got door knockers on order. So as soon as it's safe to go hang literature on doors, we'll be doing that. And as I said, there's that daily Zoom every day. If you'd like to just jump on it and meet the candidate, say hi, tell them I sent you. And as I said, I'll throw the links in the chat. But any questions, anybody can ask. But otherwise, that's my spiel. And good to see all of you.
Well, what's sort of the theme of the campaign, Arden?
Well, as I said, sort of that turning the protests of the summer into progress in the office. We really didn't see not a lot of satisfaction, even though the incumbent, the lady who's in office now, Colette McCeachin, is a Democrat. Obviously, she elected to prosecute a lot of the protesters over the summer, which was pretty unpopular, and hadn't until recently taken a stand on things like whether she was for or against the death penalty, just some, sort of basic, what we consider democratic principles that we just think aren't being effectively addressed by the office. And I'm sure Tom can probably say more about that, but
when would the primary be? In June, the same time as the statewide?
Yes. Yeah, this is for the June 8th primary.
And I assume that's Dawn McCeachin's wife.
It is. I love to be controversial.
It's, she's got her own life, but she obviously wants to be respected as a professional. So
Yep.
she's not running or holding office as his wife, and so she can't complain if people want to run against her.
Correct. Yep.
Did they do anything reduction-wise to your requirements like they did for the state?
I've not heard anything different, but like I said, imagine my surprise when I found out we only had to get 125 signatures.
What did they do?
When you were talking about needing 10,000, I was like, let me find out how much we need for this small local office. And then I looked on a thing and I was like, Tom, is this right? This says we only need 125 signatures. And I seriously, we got on a call and he was talking about how are we going to get this addressed? I was like, can you give me a clipboard and a weekend at Kroger? I got this thing under the back.
What did they do in the state?
I'm
not up to date, Richard.
Oh, I'm happy to tell you. So they reduced the numbers. So the numbers were the same as the presidential primary. And they reduced it from 10,000 to 2,000. They are still holding on to their minimum congressional district requirement, but it's at 50 versus 400. And they are actually going to provide us with a digital signature capability by February 5th. And that is huge. I mean, I think we may have been the first campaign to come out with the fact that we were super proud of Lee Carter, which may be the first press release ever to come out to say that they were super proud of, and so anyway, but the point being is that, you know, we're just super concerned about the safety of our volunteers. Danny's, well, she's in my upper left-hand corner, but she's a big supporter of us in Orange County here in CD7. And I let her on because she's literally collecting signatures for all three of the people who are speaking tonight. And she's an amazing representative of that community. And, you know, and I got to meet like 5 of her volunteers, and they were all amazing human beings last weekend. And Sean came down, and we're just like, we literally had it wasn't a Ford F-150, but similar vehicle pull through waving a Confederate flag at us as we were trying to collect signatures. So, and Khalid was there, and yeah, so pretty, yeah, anyway, pretty whatever. So she's amazing. So she gets to be on this call. Anyway.
Really quick, I just saw Jay
Yeah.
Jones pop on, so I want to make sure we get to him really quickly. But Arden, thank you for making sure that there was space to talk for our local races too. I think those are just as important. They're just, I didn't want to put a newsletter of like 500 possible names of people, so that was the only reason we limited it to the statewide races. But I'm really glad that you brought up Tom in Richmond and. As we all know, we've heard this 100 times, the highest ticket part of the ticket is not the only one that matters. So really make sure you're informed about all the local races too. And I will say really quickly, we're super excited that we have the candidates, Jay and Sean and Jennifer McClellan is going to come by later on the call. We're super excited that they were able to carve out some time for us. I know it's super busy right now. Just to make super clear, we're not endorsing anyone like as a group, but I want you all to feel like you can get information and volunteer with whoever you're passionate about. And so we still as a team want to be a resource for making that possible. And so after all of this, I think we'll share this recording of the call so that everyone can hear from these candidates who are on, but also the websites of everyone who is running in these 3 statewide races to make sure that you have knowledge about their platforms and how to volunteer and all that good stuff. But with all that out of the way, I want to make sure we pass it off to Jay. Unless Rich, did you have anything you wanted to say?
I have been empowered to make a brief statement about Jay. So yeah, Jay, hey, nice to meet you, man. Jay Jones is candidate for Attorney General. He's a lifelong resident of Norfolk and was elected to the House of Delegates in the 89th District in 2017. Since then, Jay has fought to expand Medicaid, increase minimum wage, and give teachers a raise. He also gave voice to progressive energy and environmental policies that improve the lives of all Virginians while preserving our air, water, and land. A tireless legislator, Jay championed the Ashanti Alert, a bill to establish a missing persons alert for adults in the Commonwealth. The Ashanti Alert was used as the model for a bill that eventually became federal law. He has also sponsored legislation to deconcentrate poverty in urban communities, achieve a fair regulatory scheme for our public utilities, and create an earned income tax credit in Virginia. He currently serves on the House Appropriations, Transportation, and Counties and Cities and Towns Committees. Having previously served on the General Laws and Finance Committees, he is also chairman of the House Transportation Subcommittee on Motor Vehicles. Finally, Jay serves on the Commission on Youth, the Criminal Justice Services Board, and the Commission on Electric Utility Regulation. So everyone, please, and Jay, please unmute yourself.
I think, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, welcome, man.
Okay, perfect. Hey, man, how are you? And thank you for the kind introduction. And I know some of those committees and commissions are a little bit of a mouthful, but you did a great job. But I'm happy to be here with you guys tonight. I'm glad that we could make this work and at least carve out a few minutes for us to at least speak to each other virtually. I know things are crazy, and I'm happy to see that everybody is safe and healthy. But it's good to be with you guys tonight. And again, for those of you guys who don't know me, I'm Jay. I represent the 89th District in the Virginia House of Delegates, but I'm a candidate for Attorney General. And people always want to know, what is your story? And for me, I'm really fortunate that I can trace my lineage back on both sides of my family to slaves in the American South. 5 generations back, here in Virginia, and then sort of deeper into the South. That's where I've sort of had my roots, but my sort of story really begins with my grandfather, Hillary H. Jones Jr., who was born and raised in Norfolk in 1923, left for college and law school, came back, which I sort of often would love to ask him, because it wasn't particularly a time that people were being particularly kind to folks who look like me. So he got involved in the civil rights movement, had my father and my uncle integrate a school in Norfolk, dedicated his life to public service, and he really does light up my life each and every day. But again, I'm a child of Virginia. I've been here my whole life. I went to William and Mary for undergrad, UVA for law school. I'm a practicing trial attorney in the Norfolk area, and have been elected for the last 4 years. But I'm really, really excited about what's happening in Virginia. I think we've been able to make a lot of changes here in the last few years that even 5 or 6 years ago, folks thought was unthinkable. But as we enter into 2021, as we close that chapter, that dark chapter in American history with Donald Trump, and now Virginia has an opportunity to pick up the pen to really sort of write the next era in American history, right? Pete always says, win the era. And I think that's exactly right. And Virginia has that opportunity here. And I'm excited because I think Virginia is ready to elect folks with different perspectives, fresh voices, and new ideas. And, I think I, as a 31-year-old legislator, when I got elected, I was actually the youngest legislator in the General Assembly, have what it takes to really take Virginia to the next level. We don't get to look backward, right? We have to look forward. We really need to lean into what is happening in Virginia. We are rapidly diversifying, 8.5 million people and growing. This is not the Virginia of our parents, of our grandparents' generation. We are moving ahead, and it's time for us to really make the most of that and really rise to meet this moment. And as we've been going across this Commonwealth, both physically in a safe manner and virtually, you hear a lot about what folks are looking for in their attorney general. Obviously, justice reform is a big deal. For me, who better to be the face of the state's justice system than someone who looks like what that system has oppressed for 400 years and counting? Obviously, I've been a really vocal critic of Dominion. Holding our energy utilities accountable is to me is critically important, because I believe that energy is the currency of the future, right? Energy and water, but really making sure that we've got clean water, making sure that everybody's getting a fair deal, because it's a consumer protection office at heart. And then worker protection. Labor is very, very important to me. It always has been, it always will be. Making sure that we're preventing wage theft and worker misclassification. All of those things will be priorities for us as Attorney General. But I really do think that Virginia has a chance right now to show and tell people what we're all about and who we are, what we prioritize, value, highlight, all of those things. And I really do believe that as we move ahead, we can tell people and show people, not just here in Virginia, but across the country, about who we are and what we want to value, and that Virginia is changing, right? We are, I would say this is not even the new South, this is the future South right now. And I'm so proud to be a part of all of that. And so we've been running since July. I'm so proud of the fact that we've gotten 80 folks, federal, state, and local, to endorse us, including Congresswoman Elaine Luria, Senator Cory Booker, 30 plus members of the General Assembly, a whole host of local officials, but from every corner of the Commonwealth, from Southwest to Norfolk to Shenandoah to Northern Virginia and in between. Everybody's saying, look, we're looking for something different. We want to go in a new direction, and we think you're that guy. And I've been humbled by that support, but we can't get across the finish line without folks like you guys. And I hope that you'll join our efforts. I hope that you'll look more into what we're all about. I think Khaled probably dropped a link into the chat. Please feel free to take a look, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you guys have tonight, but hopefully you'll help us get some signatures to get on the ballot. They've reduced the requirement to 2,000, but that's still a lot. So we got to get that done with different congressional districts and all that. So we'd love to get your help, and we'd love to have you join up and really get us across the finish line in June, because we are going to win. I don't think that people who thought we were not for real before a couple of weeks ago, when you saw the money report and you saw the folks who are coming out for us, this is going to be an incredible race, and I'm very, very excited about what we put together.
Well, thank you so much, Jay.
Yeah.
I have a question, and I just have no idea what the answer is. Dominion, real problem. Holding
Hey,
on
Harris.
to money that the consumers thought we were getting back.
Yep.
What role does the Attorney General as a consumer advocate play in making sure that that money comes back to us, which is what we were promised?
That's a great question. And I think you probably asked that knowing that I've sponsored legislation last year, the Fair Energy Bills Act, that got closer than anyone ever imagined to actually getting out of the Senate Commerce and Labor Committee, which is, you know, Dominion's sort of stronghold, because that money is ours. It's over $500 million. But the AG's office is critically important in two ways. First, you've got to step up and you got to be present. And so it's been my understanding that the SCC hearings, the PJM hearings, all of these sort of areas where you're supposed to step up, the AG's office really hasn't been as active as they should have been in pushing the SCC and being that consumer advocate. And so that leads into my second point, which is the resources of the office are reflective of the values of the office holder, right? Where you put those bodies in that office is reflective of what you think is important. I've gotten to work with the folks in the AG's office because of the legislation that I've introduced. And there's a couple of guys, and they're great. I actually went to high school with Mitch Burton, who works with me in Browder. And they said, look, we need more firepower. We cannot compete against 50 attorneys from McGuire Woods and these other big law firms who are arguing against us in front of the SCC. We're going to put more people into that group and make sure that that has all of the resources and firepower that they need to get the job done, because we've let Dominion run roughshod over us for years. It drives me crazy. We are working on our colleagues each and every day to bring them around to the right viewpoint on this thing. But we will be a tireless advocate. We'll use the platform. We won't sort of hesitate to jump in. You know, we've got legislation now, and the office hasn't taken a position. And to me, that's ridiculous, right? These are no-brainer consumer protection issues. You've got to step up, right? You've got to be proactive, not reactive. You've got to rise to meet that moment. And for me, that moment is right now.
Hey, Jay, I have a question as well. My name's Kellen. I live in Arlington.
Hey, Kellen.
And thank you so much for being here tonight. Really appreciate you taking this time. So I think for a number of people, especially during COVID, the AG has been, has a more positive reputation, at least in the governor, in responding to the crisis and some of the powers that the executive branch could use to deal with some of the issues around COVID. I know specifically on like rental housing and just the authority of the governor over the courts and things, that the AG was more progressive and coming out and saying, we can take a lot more action than we actually are. And so I know you brought up some examples of things that you would do, you know, differently than the current AG. Can you provide some more specific policy examples of things that, you know, if you were elected in this office, that you would sort of chart a different path, a different course?
Sure.
Policy
Well, so sure. I'm sure you've probably seen that I've been calling for a civil rights division in the office for many, many months now, and I think that idea has been co-opted. So that's important, right? But you know, if it's my idea and they're taking it, obviously it's got some merit to it. So that's one thing that I think is really, really important. And there's someone gonna be walking behind me in a second, so I apologize. The other thing for me is that, again, for 4 years, right? Everything has been focused on Donald Trump. And I understand that because we are the resistance, right? But now we have a chance to really write our new story. And so for me, the AG has always been the people's lawyer. Like, you're supposed to be fighting on behalf of Virginians. And it's one thing to have to join federal lawsuits every week because Donald Trump is going crazy, right? But now with the Biden administration, we don't have to do that. We don't have to worry about that. I've been so pleased that I'm not so stressed out every time I open up Twitter or open up my email to get a breaking news alert. Part of what I think we can do better with that office is being more accessible and accountable to the people. What we want to do is open up real satellite offices all across the state so that we can really be that community lawyer for the people, right? And have interactions and have sort of folks being able to come in and out and ask questions, because that office is incredibly powerful, but it is only as powerful as it is if people know what they can do and how they can come to us. The other thing that I think is really important for me is increasing our presence and probably creating a labor group. It is my understanding that sort of these cases of wage theft and worker misclassification have been piling up on desks, collecting dust. That to me is inexcusable. And people love to talk about how we are the best state for business in America, which is fine, but that doesn't mean anything if we don't have a strong workforce. And if our workforce doesn't feel like they can go to the AG's office for protection, from retaliation, from getting shortchanged, then what are we even here for? And so for me, it's about taking this office to the people, going into their communities, going into their neighborhoods. We know, right, because we're insiders, who the Attorney General is and what that office can do, but the average person has no idea, right? They are not as savvy when it comes to the ins and outs of this office. And for me, it's about taking it to the people. And I think that's what this New Virginia decade is all about, right? Is highlighting the people of the state, looking to them and saying, hey, what can you do, or what do you need from us, as opposed to us sort of telling them what's good for them as we continue to go forward.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, thanks. That's a great response. Unfortunately, I probably have to end this discussion because I know that
Is Jen on?
yeah, Jen is on, and she's got 15 minutes. I know she's in session and all those good things. So
yes.
You are now my last thing of the day, so I got as much time as you need, and if you want to ask Jay questions, I'm all right with that.
yeah, that's wonderful for you. I've got to also.
We have Sean after you, so we got to kind of get.
Well, so look, let me say this, Jen. Hi, it's good to see you virtually. I think I'll see you this weekend. But I want to thank you guys for giving me a chance to speak with you. Thank you for your continued advocacy. It's great that you guys still connect in this way. And I hope that you guys will join our efforts. I hope you'll help us out. And if you have any questions, do not hesitate to get in touch with me, Khalid, the campaign. It's going to be a wild ride, and it's going to be a sprint for the next few months, but we can only do it with your help. So thank you guys so much.
And Jay, you're very welcome, and you do not need to leave. But just maybe.
So I'm going to stick around for a second. I'm going to go on mute, but I do have to go eat my dinner in a few minutes, because if I don't eat, my wife gets very upset. So thank you guys again, and I'll lurk for a little while, but you guys enjoy yourselves tonight, and Jen is going to give you guys a show, so enjoy yourself.
There you go. And Khalid, thank you so much for helping make this all happen for Jay. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
I'm going to let Harris, if you don't mind, spend 60 seconds or whatever introducing Jennifer. That was his fee. No, I'm kidding. But thanks, Harris. I really appreciate it.
Well, Jen, I think what you have in front of you are people who had not necessarily been active in politics before, but got really excited by a guy named Pete Buttigieg. And I mean really excited, including the fact that Deborah and I and Victoria and Rich and some of the other people actually went to Iowa and knocked on doors in the middle of Iowa winter. And so these are people who are very, very hardworking, very committed to getting things done. So that's the introducing you to them, and to you rather. Jen McClellan is supported by Deborah and me because she reminds us of Pete in many ways. She's as smart as a whip, but doesn't show it off and doesn't talk down to people. She has a great deal of empathy, which is really, really important. Many politicians we found don't have much. And one of the reasons Joe Biden's so successful is a lot of empathy. And what's really most important to me, and it sort of picks up on what Jay was saying, is we're in a new era. And no disrespect to another candidate who's been in the race, who's been in office before, but it's time for change. It's time for somebody with creative, new ideas for the next few years, the next decade. And Senator McClellan's that person. So let me introduce Senator Jennifer McClellan.
Well, thank you, Harris, and thank you all for having me join you tonight. And I'm gonna be really quick because I want to get right to your questions. But first, I want to say thank you. I'm glad you all got engaged. I'm glad you're staying engaged. You probably noticed once you get the bug of volunteering on campaigns and working to elect Democrats, it never leaves you. And I got that bug as a kid, frankly. And to tell you how I got interested in government and politics, I've got to tell you about my family. My parents grew up in the segregated South during the Depression, and hearing their stories about living through the New Deal and living through the New Frontier and the Great Society and participating in the Civil Rights Movement and having to live through Jim Crow, I came to understand at 11 that government at its best is a force for progressive change, solving problems, making people's lives better. At its worst, it's a force that oppresses some for the benefit of others. So at 11, I decided I got to do whatever I can to make government that positive force. I didn't know what that meant at 11, but when I went to college, I joined the Young Democrats. That was 30 years ago. And ever since, even myself as an elected official, every year, for 30 years, I've worked to elect Democrats. I've worked to build this party. I've worked to organize communities. I've worked to get people involved who weren't involved, because I believe in the principle of a government by, of, and for all of the people. And I ran for office eventually because I wanted to be the one making the change, not just electing other people to do it. So I got elected to the House of Delegates in 2005. I spent 11 years there, then moved over to the Senate in 2017. For 14 years, I was in the wilderness. I remember when the House was 32 Democrats, and we were fighting against all kinds of crazy Republican mess on every issue you can think about. And I was in the trenches fighting against some of the worst restrictions on a women's access to reproductive health, some of the worst things for our environment, some of the worst criminal, I can't even call it criminal justice because it wasn't justice. It was tough on crime. The first bill I ever had to vote on was the Marshall-Newman Amendment to ban same-sex marriage in our state constitution, which I obviously voted no on. I was able to make some progress in the minority party, but once we got the majority, boy, did we use it. And I carried in 2020 49 bills, 36 of which became law on just about every issue we care about as Democrats. I passed the Reproductive Health Act, that Protection Act, that rolled back 4 restrictions to abortion care that the Republicans put in place. I made the Virginia Clean Economy, made the Virginia the first state in the South to have 100% clean energy standard, and remove barriers to solar and wind. You name the issue, I've made progress on. Here's why I'm running for governor, though. When things were good, they weren't good for everybody. In too many communities, too many Virginians were being left behind. We had 400 years of inequity that needed to be addressed. COVID's made that worse. Now we need a governor who will rebuild our economy, our healthcare and our economic safety nets, our education system in a way that centers people who are hurting, in a way that centers people who run all of these things, and in a way that restores faith in. A lot of people have lost faith in government's ability to understand and care about their problems, much less solve them. And we need to do it in a way that addresses that inequity. And I will say that as I sat like you in quarantine in the middle of just the depression of watching what happened to George Floyd and the protests afterwards. And I live 2 blocks away from the largest statue of Robert E. Lee that was ground zero for 60 days of protests here in the city of Richmond. And as I sat through all of that, I said, you know what? I'm fighting the same fights my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents fought. And I can't look my kids in the eye and tell them I did everything I could to keep you from fighting those fights unless I'm willing to step up and do everything I can within my power, including running for the most powerful office in the Commonwealth and using that power to solve those problems. So that's why I'm running. I'm happy to take your questions on anything you want to talk about for as long as we can.
Jen, why don't you talk about your childcare proposal, because I thought that was it's very exciting.
Well, thank you. So I'm the daughter of 3rd-generation educators, including an early childhood educator. And I've seen firsthand that the equity gap begins at birth. And I use childcare and early childhood education interchangeably because learning begins at birth. And the key to economic success, given how many workers are parents, and the key to closing the equity gap and preschool and kindergarten readiness is universal childcare, not just universal pre-K, universal childcare. Now, how do we get there? Pre-COVID, we didn't have enough access to affordable quality care. And the financing system was a mess. So my proposal is to have universal childcare by making sure no single family pays more than 7% of their income on childcare. But we also have to stabilize the childcare system. And I've started that process with a bill that I introduced this year. It's in the Finance Committee. It's going to pass. That will begin to stabilize our childcare system. That will begin to restructure how we finance it and restructure how we pay our childcare workers. Because you can't have quality care if you don't have workers that you're paying as if that's the professionals they are and as the valued workforce that they are. So that's it in a nutshell. If you go to my website, which I'll put in the chat, you can see the plan in more detail. But that is the foundation of both my education plan, and I'll be rolling out my K-12 and higher ed a little bit later. And it's also the foundation of my economic development plan.
A question.
We talked a little
Yes.
earlier on another call about the issue of the vaccine rollout and how it hasn't really lived up to expectations. And you had some very interesting thoughts on that that I wasn't aware of. Maybe you could share with the group.
Yeah, I think there are four things I'll touch on, and I'll try to be brief on them. Part of it is we have not had sort of central guidance and management of this. We've kind of left it to our individual health districts to roll out the vaccines. And as a result, how well the vaccine is being rolled out depends on what zip code you're in. We should have, in retrospect, had more of a centralized plan. That's one. Two, our Department of Health and our healthcare infrastructure and safety nets are not nimble. And because they're not nimble, it's very hard to move quickly. And that has been part of the problem. Part of the problem has also been communication. And related to that, having the infrastructure in place to clearly communicate. Here in Richmond, when we rolled out 1B, because the Department of Health used Google Translate instead of an actual translator, there were lots of people, non-English speaking people, who were told they were eligible for the vaccine when they weren't. So they went in and got an appointment. And so the people that were eligible couldn't get appointments. That's ridiculous. Why are we using Google Translate? And why didn't we, from the beginning of the administration, build diversity and inclusion, not just as a cabinet position, but as a central mission of every people-facing agency that we have, which is something that I would do as governor. And related to that is just the communication. What I have noticed from the beginning of the pandemic is our non-English speaking communities and our low-income communities, we are not communicating to them through trusted leaders in the community through the medium that they understand and use. And so whether it was getting information out about mask mandates or masks or how to get a mask or vaccines or curfews, they weren't getting that information. And so we need to build that just infrastructure of good public service in our agencies. And that's what I plan to do as governor.
Okay, well, I know you have to run and Sean is teed up. I just want to remind everybody that the single most visible political campaign in the entire country this year is governor of Virginia. I mean, it is the whole ball of wax. That will be how people measure how well the Biden administration is doing. And maybe that's an unfair way to do it, but that's the reality of the situation. With no other gubernatorial races that are really contested, seriously contested, this is it. So choose your best candidates, get behind them. Kyle, who you see there up in the upper right-hand corner, can fill up a bus. Jennifer, faster than anybody else I know. He's a master at getting volunteers together. And so these are the people who really know how to work and know how to get it done. And Deborah and I are very excited about supporting her. And we're seeing this across the Commonwealth. And she's going to be our next governor. And back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Kyle, I know that Kyle's going to ask Christy if she still has a question, which I just apparently did.
Okay.
But I know that there's a second question too. So
Okay, go
I
ahead.
think that Sean has a hard stop at 8, but if they're not too long questions, we're okay, Sean? Okay, so 2 questions. Christy first.
Okay, yeah, I actually do have a question. During COVID, we've noticed, I live out in Western Loudoun County, where it is slightly rural. And I know from friends throughout the state that we have real high-speed digital, affordable high-speed digital access problem. We are not poor in Western Loudoun County. but we do not actually have the structural services to have our children go to school remotely and safely. And many of us cannot remotely work because we do not have access, like literal access to high-speed internet. My best friend, her daughter goes to a hill in her front yard to get a signal. What can you do about this? What is your plan? This cannot be a new problem for you. You must have heard about this before.
It's not a new problem. It's not limited to Virginia. This is a nationwide problem. And we are going to get some assistance from the new administration. Here's the problem. In the parts of the country in Virginia that are not connected are the most expensive to connect. So what it's going to take is just investment in the infrastructure and not a one size fits all approach, because you got to pick the right technology for the geography. So what we need to do at both the federal and the state level is work with our local communities to figure out what is the right technology for this area. And now let's invest in the infrastructure to get it there. Is it through a public-private partnership, which works for some areas? Is it through public authorities where the locality itself provides the service? That works for some areas. Is it a combination? That works for some areas. But the bottom line is a combination of, and really, if the feds did it, it would be most efficient. They haven't done it yet. We need a combination of money and then helping with the technology to connect these folks. There is also an affordability issue though. In some areas, they are connected, but they can't afford the product. The federal government, the FCC has already started work on that by expanding what's called the Lifeline program, shifting that more to broadband. It was for like a century almost, or maybe not that long, but for a long time it was used for just voice. So they're making progress on that by subsidizing the cost. But those are the two issues: is money to get the infrastructure in the ground to connect the last homes that aren't connected, and then in the areas where affordability is an issue, making sure there's an affordable product.
Anybody else?
Yep, I had a question as well. Thank you for being here, Senator. My name is Colin McBeth from Arlington. And my question is around racial disparities throughout the state and especially in our housing markets. So Arlington is one of the richest counties within the state, but we have huge disparities in life expectancy, up to 10 years, depending on what neighborhood you live in and what the color of your skin is. We have huge disparities in educational attainment, in employment, in just, you name it, we have it. And this is in a wealthy, prosperous, and, somewhat liberal, community. Would you support having a statewide mandate that localities similar to the 2015 HUD affirmatively furthering fair housing rule would be required to assess those disparities and develop plans and strategies for addressing them with specific metrics and timetables, so that localities are required by law to take these issues seriously, because so few of them actually do. And equity, as much as many elected leaders like to talk about it, is always seems to be a second priority to everything else. It's always, well, if we have time, we'll worry about, how this impacts people of different, races or ethnicities or what have you. So would you support something like that?
I would, but that's not enough. We not only have to mandate that they make it a priority, we've got to give them the tools that they need to actually address it. And that's important because here local governments only have the authority that the General Assembly gives them. Affordable housing, it's a money issue. Again, it is that wages have not kept up with the cost of construction. And I've done a lot of work helping give local governments more zoning tools so that they can incentivize density. But a lot of times what you see is this anti-NIMBY view that views affordable housing as, well, those people are going to come in here. And so what we need to pass, and I think we're actually going to do it this year. Hopefully I won't have to do this as governor. If not, I'll do it as governor. We need an anti-NIMBY law that says local governments cannot deny housing developments solely based on the number of affordable units they're going to be. We need to increase funding in the housing trust fund. But the other thing we need to do is help people understand how policy decisions made decades, or in some cases centuries ago, the impacts of them didn't just go away with a magic wand when those laws ended. The reason you have segregated communities goes back to redlining. It goes back to when schools were closed. It goes back to transportation, street decisions where neighborhoods were destroyed to build a highway, and then the highway segregates that poor community from where the economic development and the grocery store and everything is. So we've got to proactively address the disparities that exist, and not just say we want you to make it a priority, but we want you to understand how it got there, and then we're going to give you the tools you need to address it.
Thank you. And can I follow up on my question too, and ask, would you also sort of commit to ensuring that localities have the information about the actual equitable impact? So I know inclusionary zoning is a really important affordable housing tool, but if you look at the data, it predominantly helps white low-income people, and oftentimes at the expense of people of color. There's a lot of other tools that are really important for affordable housing that if you don't have a plan specifically to address the vulnerable communities that are negatively impacted by it, can actually make things worse. But I think a lot of local decision makers they don't think about this, or they don't know that this happens. So they implement these policies that have even worse impacts, even though they help low-income people who are white. So is that something that you would try and do? And any thoughts on the best way to make sure that the localities in Virginia understand these real impacts?
Yes, that is something that I'm willing to do. And I think, part of it might be just as simple as, if you are on a zoning board, there's certain mandatory training that you need to have just to understand the history of how the things developed in that locality, which is something I just thought off the top of my head, frankly. But it's like, if you don't understand how the developments in your own locality were developed and the history behind that, you will make it worse. I've seen time and time again, policymakers' decisions are based on what they know, based on their own life experiences. And the more people who grew up after Jim Crow, who aren't taught about it in school, the family stories are dying, or if it wasn't their family's experience, they don't know. They may have all the best intentions in the world, but they're exacerbating those inequities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, if you want to get involved in a campaign, Courtney McCargo has put up her email address. Obviously, you can go to the website. Because we're in session right now, Senator McClellan can't raise money. The same with Delegate Jones, but they can do meet and greets. And so if enthusiastic, we encourage you to put together a meet and greet. We did one here in Northern Virginia a couple of weeks ago. We had 45 people, and probably 30 of them really didn't know much about Jen before the call, and afterwards they were all very enthusiastic. So if you want to get involved, that's one way to get involved in this Zoom world, to help set up a meet and greet. And with that, I'll turn it back to Richard.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So I had to change my background because we're a non-politically oriented group, to introduce our next. So Sean has spent his entire life fighting for equity, fairness, and transparency in government. I met him first while he was serving as the president of the Fairfax NAACP. In fact, the deal was that we, as people, reached out to the Fairfax NAACP as part of a little committee that we broke off into after we had kind of finalized or got close to finalizing our petition process, and said, well, so what else? How else are we going to try to get out the Pete name? So I wrote to Sean, and Sean literally responded to me within 24 hours. I had no expectations, and it was great. And it just also happened to line up with the fact that they were hosting a candidate forum that next month. So I was like, huge win for me, but it was just happening, and I kind of jumped in. So yeah, so Sean is, he is the youngest president of, I think, any chapter of the NAACP, but definitely the youngest of the Fairfax chapter. He increased membership by about, I want to say about 300%. I mean, it was a crazy increase, but his leadership is something that I seriously acknowledge, and I really I'm going to use him. I fell in love with. I mean, I just think the way that he talks to people and empowers people is absolutely amazing. So I'll get back to the pitch. As president, Sean was active in addressing issues of racism in Virginia public schools. He led the advocacy effort toward renaming Robert E. Lee High School in Springfield to the John R. Lewis High School. He's been a leader on addressing the school to prison pipeline, affordable housing, and worker protections during coronavirus. Of course, Sean is a frequent speaker and author on race, equity, and police and criminal justice reform. And so I'm super proud to announce my very good friend, Sean Perryman. So.
Thanks, Rich. What an introduction. I really appreciate it.
I think you should shut up now, Sean. Quit.
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Have a good one.
Hey, it's, same with Pete. So I'm going to mute myself and be quiet.
Yeah, Rich, he came out to boost for Pete at our NAACP meeting, and he got some supporters there, some heckling, but he kept coming back. He kept coming back. We became really good friends, and it's one of the secrets that I had to my success with NAACP is that if you walk through the door, you're part of the team now. So he actually became a great member of our organization, great volunteer. And so thank you for that warm introduction. My name is Sean Perryman. I'm running for Lieutenant Governor here in Virginia. I don't know where to start. I have so many friends on this line. I see Danny Rivera, who's my new best friend. I also see Ayo Deli. I see just so many great people. Oh, Victoria's over there. I'm trying to see all the people in the chat. But thank you all for all the support you've given me as I go through this journey. And then it's great to follow someone like the senator who's done such great work in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I also see Harris, who's been so kind to me and supported us as well. But I'll tell you how I came to this. I wasn't someone who I don't think anyone would predict would become a lieutenant governor of Virginia or even a candidate for lieutenant governor of Virginia, frankly. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and we first moved to Virginia when I was about 6 or 7 years old because we were looking for better schools. And, my journey was one where I sort of had to find my way blindly in a lot of ways. I was the first person in my family to go to college, first one to go to law school. And, as part of that, I had to pay off all that debt that you often accumulate in that process. And my story, as it starts to this journey, I think starts after law school. I'd been practicing for a number of years, was working for a law firm. And then one day a partner walked into my office and said, "We're going to represent Donald Trump, and we want you to be the senior associate on the case." And at that time, Donald Trump was a candidate for president. He had famously or infamously said some really racist comments about Mexicans and people of color. And I have an idea why they wanted me to be the senior associate on the case and try to minimize those comments. But here I was, and I was someone who had worked with public policy growing up, had worked in the mayor's office and the UN as an intern and the State Department. And I cared deeply about politics, but because I was a practicing attorney billing hours, I didn't have the time to dedicate to it. But I spent a lot of time yelling at my TV. And I started thinking about, here I am yelling at this TV, here I am with this 1-year-old daughter, and I know that this Trumpism, whatever this is, and at that time we didn't have it fully fleshed out, isn't something I wanted to be associated with. But I also had the reality of I just bought a house here in Fairfax, Virginia, and I had a mortgage and everything else. So I could have easily put my head down and just billed those hours and kept doing it. But what I decided to do was quit my job. And I walked away and didn't have a plan of where I was going to go or what I was going to do. But I knew it was the right decision because I understood what Trumpism was. and what it represented and the threat it represented to our nation. And that may seem like hyperbole, but at the time I deeply felt that in my heart. And as luck would have it, as fortune would have it, I was able to find a job a month later working with Congressman Elijah Cummings as the counsel on the House Oversight Committee. And on that committee, I was advising the Democrats, and they had hired me, funny enough, because they figured they were going to get a lot of investigations into what everyone knew would be President Hillary Clinton. But as we know, spoiler alert, that never happened. And I ended up in the same year quitting a job potentially representing Trump to going to investigating Donald Trump. And through that process, I got to learn, know the congressman, got to sharpen my policy skills, but I met the congressman who was really imbued with a sense of purpose. And I'll never forget my first interview with him. He asked me, "What feeds your soul?" And I had spent so much time studying like the legislation and the investigations he was doing, but what he wanted to know is what drove you every day? What made you get up and do this? And I don't know if I had a great answer at the time, but I know now that what drives me is service, bringing people together around a sense of serving our community, uplifting people. And so many of the things that we have done has only been accomplished because we were able to do them together. So after Trump became president, the other thing the congressman said was that we were in a fight for the soul of our democracy. And I knew that that fight wasn't limited to the federal level. I looked around at my state and local government. I looked around at the state level in my community, and I saw so many ugly things that were emblematic of Trumpism. Like Rich mentioned, Robert E. Lee High School and Jeb Stuart High School. And I said, how can I get involved to change this scene around us? How can I make sure that my community is a one that's welcoming to my daughter? What makes me proud of the community I'm bringing her up in? So I joined the Democratic Committee, the Fairfax Democratic Committee, and I eventually became a leader on the steering committee. And I joined the NAACP, where I went on to become the youngest president in its 102-year history. I don't know if I'm the youngest president in any branch, but definitely Fairfax. And we grew that organization by 1,000 members in a year and a half. And the way we did it was constantly fighting for other people. It didn't matter if it was a Black issue, issue with the LGBTQ community, if it's an issue for immigrants. We are all a community, and we're going to stand together. And that was kind of first and foremost of what we did and put forth. And through that, we had success. Like we said, we changed Robert E. Lee to John Lewis High School. We had substantive changes in the school system. We were able to negotiate changes to that memorandum of understanding between the police and the schools that reduced the arrests by 60%. We changed the first responder system. We were able to go out into the community and make changes to these intractable, what was seen as intractable issues. And I think that was by communicating with folks, constantly showing up and fighting. When this pandemic hit, I immediately tried to shift the organization from doing our day-to-day fundraising and everything else and ceremonies to COVID relief. We were able to feed first responders. We were able to save 30 businesses working with the Virginia 30-Day Fund. And again, we were out in the community. But what I saw time and time again, whether it was COVID or whether it was the George Floyd incident, I saw two things. One, that certain communities, especially Black communities, were hit first and hit hardest. And two, I saw that we didn't have everyone at the Senate and the state level understanding what this was about and how do we make real reform. It's not, we don't always have great senators like the one we have on the Zoom. We have a lot of people who stand in the way of progress. And so what I wanted to do with this run was to take on that system and have a new voice to the conversation, someone coming as an advocate. And I see so many people who are women and people of color, and so often we are told we aren't the ones to lead. And I had that sort of voice of self-doubt, but I said, you know, here I am, someone who's advised Democrats in Congress. Here I am, someone who's led in my community. And here I am with an attorney with years of experience. Why shouldn't it be me to run for lieutenant governor? And when I took that attitude and said, I'm going to go out there and just fight like hell for my community, like I've always done, and we're going to do it our way. We don't accept any corporate donations. We're not, we're just going out there, getting our message out there. And after officially joining the race in October, we've raised well over $200,000, the most of any candidate in Northern Virginia. And we did that through small dollar donations, having a lower average donation than most of the candidates in the race. And so what we're proving is that if you engage with these communities, if you have a message that you believe in, You don't have to be the establishment politician that everyone was waiting for. You just have to give a damn about people, and you have to be willing to go out there and say your message and say what you're about and who we're standing and fighting for. So that's how I've approached this race. And I'm so proud of the work we've done. We've gotten a lot of endorsements since we've gotten in the race. We've raised money, but we also need the volunteers. And so I'll drop our website in the chat, but we've had so much help from all these great people. And I just want to thank you for believing in us, giving us the time. And I hope that those of you who may be hearing me for the first time will join us. And I'm looking forward to getting to know all of you. I'm happy to talk about the issues, but Sean Perryman for Lieutenant Governor, and I hope that we get to see each other soon and work together on making a Commonwealth that we all deserve. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. So we have, there was a question raised by Kellen. Actually, I'm not even quite sure it's a question, but I'll read it. And then I know that Kelly has her hand raised and I have a question too. So Kellen first, I guess he says, is Kellen here? Do you just want to say it?
I'm here, Rich. Yeah, it was more just a statement for the candidates on than an actual question. But yeah, we don't have to read it. I'm happy to yield my time to other people who have questions.
No worries. I appreciate you're making a statement. Christy, please go ahead.
Yes, hi. Thank you for running, but I do have a question. Since you are from an advocacy group, I'm just wondering, with the AAPI community being the fastest growing community in Virginia and Korean being the fourth most spoken language in the state, how are you reaching out to this community, which historically feels very disassociated from politics? So we are a powerful force, and there's a lot of us here, but most of them feel that politics and frankly, just general civic duty in America is not for them, just because they don't really feel like they're truly American yet. So how are you planning on gathering an untapped resource?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something I take seriously. The issue with COVID has been, it's hard to reach out to any community, but especially those that are typically not represented in Democratic committees and everything else. It makes it even more difficult. What we've tried to do through this is try to get sort of leaders that we bring into our steering committee and folks like that. So one of my endorsers is Shamali Hoff, who's the co-chair of the AAPI Democratic Committee. And so I've used her to tell me, where do I need to be to reach out to these communities? We're also thinking about getting on, just to the point you made, Korean radio, and trying to make sure we have translations in the language that people read and speak. So these are the things that we've been working on, and I've been really relying on the volunteers from that community who I've already established relationships with to help guide me into reaching out to them. But it's not lost on us that that is an untapped resource, an untapped community. But what we're trying to do is really work through sort of our liaisons to the community to help us get out there.
So the question I posted in the chat was just something I didn't want to forget. There was a recent survey that I received as a member of Fairfax County that talked about what you had, what are the qualifications that you wanted to have as your new, if you, as part of the new Fairfax County police chief, like what are these things that people, that this guy should have? And so I was wondering what you felt, having been involved for the past year with the Fairfax NAACP, how much influence do you think the NAACP has had in the past year, particularly with Fairfax County Police Services?
I would say a great deal. One of the people who has endorsed me is Rodney Luss. He's the chair of public safety for the Board of Supervisors here in Fairfax. And the reason he's endorsed me is because we really did the work to get them to understand why we needed to change the first responder system. But we've been working directly on putting pressure on the police to release data. for 5 years now, they've been resisting releasing any data related to the stops and frisks, different sorts of demographic data. We finally broke through that and got that done this year. And we did that through our advocacy efforts. Surprisingly, I tell people a lot of the stuff that we accomplished by kind of, I don't want to say going after the police, but being advocates for more transparency and accountability in policing. But we still maintain a good relationship with the chief of police because we were able to do that without alienating people. And that's because these things, when I talk about this, I'm one of those people who's all for rethinking how we think about budgets for policing and education and all these different things. But it's not an issue of, oh, I hate the police. It's an issue of transparency and accountability in all forms of government, especially people who are carrying guns and have the power of law behind them. So that's the way I talk about it. And I think that's why it's been so effective here in the county I'm from.
Thanks, Sean. I do have other questions, but I want to be fair and straight up and nonpartisan about the fact that I suspect that we're probably at our end time. So if there's one last, if anybody has another question.
I'd just like to make a comment. You know, it's not just that Sean took an organization and increased the membership. I was Deborah and I were major contributors to the Fairfax County NAACP in the mid 1980s as part of our support for Doug Wilder and a lot of other issues. And I'll tell you, for the last 40 years, I thought, gee, we just, pardon my French, pissed that money away. Because time and again, I would look to that organization to take some kind of a leadership role on behalf of obviously the African-American community, but people of color. And it just wasn't happening. And it was just one disappointment after another. And I'd get a solicitation, and I'd just throw it in the garbage can. Sean has turned that around 180 degrees. It is now a strong, vibrant organization with clear agendas. And that's what shows leadership. And that's what we need. We need leaders.
I appreciate that, Harris. And that's true. And we've not only, one of the things I look at with the leadership is that you shouldn't be limited by anything. And when Fairfax, we weren't limited to the county of Fairfax. We've been leading on the statewide level as well, getting involved in that conversation and everything that affects our community. So when I look at the lieutenant governor role, a lot of people say, oh, you just preside over the Senate. You're one of 3 statewide elected officials. You need to be leading on all the issues. You need to be speaking up, and you shouldn't look at just the parameters of the role. You should look at it as a leadership opportunity. What I think distinguishes me from some of the other folks running, I'm not running for the sake of running, looking for the next office or having my name on a yard sign. We need real change. We need people who are not going to go there and wait 4 years to go run for something else. And that's what I think is the primary difference between me and some of the other candidates in this race.
Yeah, and certainly, as many of you know, I'm very close to Don Beyer. And when he was lieutenant governor, I mean, he focused on teenage pregnancy. I mean, as you said, Sean, it wasn't like in his job description. It was just something that was not being focused on. He felt personally very strong about. And from his bully pulpit of being lieutenant governor and bringing together a lot of different stakeholders, he was able to make a difference. And so I think that's the kind of leadership that you're talking about. You just don't read the job description and check the governor's pulse every morning and then preside over the Senate.
Appreciate that. And Rich, we're gonna get yard signs. I promise. It's happening. It's happening. It will happen.
We've got nothing. No, well, it's a joke. It's an aside, but so I just want to be fair to. I just want to like officially end Sean's time and just thank you, Sean. Honestly, you are welcome to stay. I know that Jennifer is still here and Ayodele is here because I know he's working for the Jennifer Ford campaign. I absolutely want to offer him an opportunity if he wants to speak for her.
Last time I saw Ayodele, I had to tackle a guy who was rushing a stage. It's a fun story.
I mean, and I think he even has like, he's got a child now since we
congrats
seen this man. So Ayodele, if you actually, I would really appreciate it if you wanted to spend a couple minutes talking to the group as a former VA for Pete person and supporter, a Pete employee, and obviously in your current role. So please, the stage is yours if you want it.
Thanks, Rich, and thanks, everyone. I'm here primarily as a former Virginia for Peace, so I just wanted to see everyone's faces and amazing candidates here, from Jennifer to Sean, and so I don't want to take away from that. I want to show you all something I've been holding on to from HQ, which I grabbed off the wall like as soon as I could. I don't know if that looks familiar to everyone. So yeah, again, like Rich mentioned, my wife and I had a baby on October 31st during GOTV weekend. So it's been a whirlwind of the last couple of months, but I'm so happy to see y'all. I'm so happy to see that y'all are staying as active as ever. It warms my heart to read articles about the Department of Transportation and see, 10 months after the primary campaign ended, mentions of Pete's supporter network and Pete's volunteer operation that now is gonna, pivot and help push for, better equity in transportation and communities and infrastructure, and the list goes on. So, it was such a privilege to work with y'all during 2019 and 2020, and I'm so excited that y'all are still trucking, that y'all are gonna, help these fantastic candidates here in this Commonwealth, and that we're gonna continue moving Virginia forward in 2021. So I'm just here to say hi, and thank you all for everything that you continue to do. And let's chat offline whenever. You all, I'm sure, have my contact information.
And the Pete volunteers are legendary. I just noticed Brenda here, who I don't know how I didn't see her before. It's good to see you.
It's actually,
we have to remember Pete's going to be
Brand
back.
Dazzle, just so you know.
I mean, there's a reason to stick together. Pete's not done yet.
No. Okay, so I guess I will officially close the candidate forum, but so happy that I still see Jennifer here and Sean and Ayodele. Please feel free to speak about your candidate, and that's awesome. And so let's have an open forum. Like this, it's a reunion of sorts, right? So I don't know.
Thanks for pulling this together, Rich. This is great, and Kyle, thank you for pulling it together.
One thing I do want to say before people hop off or stay on and chat, whatever works. I think just as we all sort of, I think there was a sense that, even though we all supported Pete in the presidential race, like he didn't have a monopoly on great ideas. And I think the same goes for the Virginia races. We are super lucky in this state to have so many really qualified candidates, so many people that I could, personally just feel happy to thrust my support behind, in November and cast my vote for. Obviously, we're super thankful that we had our 3 speakers tonight, but really just take your time and understand, the platforms of everyone who's running. Make sure that you get to hear their voice too, and not just like read something on a page, like participate in events like these and other open forums, really get to know people, because we have some really, really strong candidates in Virginia. I think we've got this is a state where I think people are really making a lot of progress, thanks to, the work of advocacy organizations, the work of, folks like Jennifer in the House and Senate. So really, you can't go wrong, so just, keep learning as much as you can and get involved and with the pride definitely in November. I just wanted to throw that out there.
That's awesome. So everybody should feel free to just kind of open up their mute button, and I mean, unless there's like super loud.
So I just wanted to say something really quick, because I'm about to hop off, but I just wanted to say hi to Jen. I don't know if you remember me, Jen. We did have an awesome opportunity to talk. I'm so happy to see you again. I'm so team Jen, so just so you know, I'm rooting for you. And obviously I'm
political.
Sorry. Well, I had my dream team on tonight, if that's any, indication of where I'm going. So I just wanted to say really quick before I get off that I represent a population of people in the rural communities, which is kind of weird because I'm a Puerto Rican woman from New York, but I live in a tiny little town called Orange, Virginia, in the middle of like nowhere. And I decided, just like a lot of people who were inspired here after the after all of the social injustices that happened early through the spring and early last year, I decided that I couldn't sit still and I needed to get out and get involved, and I needed to do something or I was going to come out of, I couldn't yell at the TV anymore. Like it just wasn't going to work. I had to get up and get out. So I decided that I wanted for all of our elected officials, or the people who wanted our vote, to hear us, to listen to us, to be connected to us. And being in this little town, I felt completely disconnected. So over the last year, I created this little group out of my town, and I just decided to reach out to all of our elected officials, people who are running for offices, and I wanted them to come talk to us, come tell us why you want our vote, come tell us why you're vying for this office. Why is it that we should vote for you? We're in a tiny town. Nobody really knows us. Nobody really hears us. Candidates and people on the campaign trail and elected officials are usually attracted to the denser, more populated areas. It makes sense, I get it, but there's a bunch of us out here, out in the sticks, that are, that could help, with your guys' campaign, or just as your constituents, we have concerns. So I'm just really, I feel very fortunate that Rich, I connected with Rich and that he invited me to this call. I feel really fortunate to be able to have gotten the attention of people like Jennifer McClellan and Sean Perryman and all of the people that we've connected to, which in the spirit of nonpartisanship or bipartisanship, we have also spoken to the Republican candidates for several offices. So our little group is really trying to connect all the candidates in a nonpartisan way to our community, so that they get to ask questions and be connected in that process. So I'm just fortunate, and I'm super happy, to be connected to all of you guys. I hope to work with you guys in some way, shape, capacity in the future. Rich, you got me. Sean.
The truth
Danny,
is,
you bring up a point that we have to think about. In a normal election year, no COVID, these candidates would be out at the end of town dump on a Saturday morning, shaking hands, because there'd be hundreds of people coming through and going their garbage. Well, they can't do that. None of them can do it. And so any organization, whether it intends to endorse or not, that has a public policy focus, that can provide a forum like you're doing, and is great. I've been going back and forth with Christy. Maybe we'll do that. She'll do it too. But I mean, just think about that. The public service has to be done by these organizations, because the candidates can't do what they would normally do, which is to take pre-existing crowds of people and go there. They're on Fairfax County Democratic Committee has whatever 400 people in a meeting, and you go and you shake hands and gone. I mean, it's just, for now, it's gone. So anything you can do, you all belong to different organizations. And as you can see, the candidates are eager to interact.
They are. You got to be creative in this time, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to be creative and tap into that. So thank you guys so much again. I will see you guys this weekend. Well, not you, Rich.
No.
Yeah, but I'll see you soon somewhere around here. I might bring you back out to the stage.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's cool.
And I have to run too, but
Awesome. Thank you, Danny. Really nice to have you.
I just want to say thank you, Danny, for having us. We were in Orange last weekend. It was great. We're going to be in Madison County this weekend on Saturday. So I'm looking forward to it. And by the way, I know some people said they're delegates and state senators, so that you can't donate to them. I'm not, so you can donate to me. just putting it out there. Just put it in the air.
I was teeing it up for you, man. I surprised you waited this long.
But thank you all for having me. I really do appreciate it. And I'm going to put my email in the chat so you can all reach me if you need to.
Yeah, that's great. I did post a couple links earlier and you can scroll through it. This video is definitely recorded and every campaign can utilize it. I'll send an email out to everybody for sure. Post it. So I guess, I don't know, what are we up to? What's going on for everybody?
I gotta
Christy,
run.
what are you
Thank-
doing these days?
Thank you.
Guys, I'm gonna jump off. I probably need to eat dinner and make sure my kids aren't feeling bad.
Bye, guys.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Absolute
Thank you
pleasure to
all
have
so
you.
much.
Thank you for
So
listening.
good
Bye,
to see everybody.
Good to see
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.